the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics come into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you haven't jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. What many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. And it's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest. It meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. If you believe in this number as I do and would like to join me in the fight for reparations, please email me at friendsofadostv@gmail.com. That's friendsofadostv@gmail.com.
Good afternoon on the West Coast. Good afternoon in the mountain. Good afternoon in the central. Good afternoon on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Reparationist Perspective, bringing you those ADOCS hot topics and making the case for reparations making the case for weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering. And today, family, it's part 2. What's up, Brian? Thank you so much for joining the live. It is and Trey X. I thank you guys. It was such a short notice. It might just be a handful of us this afternoon. ADOCS life is happening, y'all. But I am getting to a place, I'm naming it and claiming it, where I'm smoothing things out and becoming my own economy while advocating for ADOCS exclusively for the reparations we are owed in the trillions over multi-generations. Websites are being built. It's going to be live and in living color, like I always am, family. You know me. But I want to be in control of it, you see. I'm so tired of being shadow banned by YouTube and what I affectionately call ScrewTube and Racebook. You know, I just got to thinking, if Racebook was the only place where I was live, from them disabling all of my accounts, that would have wiped out all of my archives. So I don't want to give any of these social media sites that much power. It is imperative with your support. Thank you so much for all of you that have supported the show. Let me fly my banner, because I mean, it takes a lot of time, energy, and resources to put these shows together. And as part of the new Black media. So whatever you can do, I'm so grateful to you for your support. But know that it's helping me to become independent of all of these. I'm not even going to give Patreon the money that they want. All of these sites require a piece of you. And I need every dime towards the advocacy for the ADOCS reparations and for educating the masses. So thank you so much for your contributions. I'm going to jump right into today's topic. Sorry for the late notice. I'm working, family. I have a job in the courts, and then I have to factor this in the meantime and in between time along with my daughter. So it's a lot to always be timely, but I'm going to work with whom I've got right here today, and everyone else can watch the archive. I thank you for being here. This is part 2. Yes, I did go on Fox Soul, the Black Report. Now, I was trying my best to be more whitewashed, if you will, like in my delivery. It was an epic fail. I have yet to review the tape, but I intend to. I do like that I gave one of the mainstream reporters life. I mean, one of the mainstream anchors. She was like, "Oh my God, you have said everything that I'm feeling right now." You know, I got into a lot of things. I was all over the road. I was just a running, leaking faucet of information. And they seem appreciative of what I contributed. But I'm going to be sharing that with you guys once I review it, because I don't know how to go anywhere and not be Angela Nirvana and not bring the fire and the smoke. I mean, we're at George Floyd 929, and every show I do is to make the case for why we need social and economic justice, like, 100 years ago. But I digress. Let me get into today's topic. I will be sharing that with you. So I'm going to continue the narrative on what happened with that Biden address to Congress. I want to finish that segment out. And so I'm going to use this hour to I tried to shorten the number of news clips I'm going to use to make my point about the things I observed. So let me catch you guys up for those who have not seen the prior video. Last Thursday was where I left off with this topic. And so Biden's first 100 days. Now, I was in the midst of going over an article about the low employment numbers for our Black men and how dire this situation is as Biden gives Asians protections and 80.5 million for their COVID relief. We get to die disproportionately from COVID, but he gives them 80.5 million to AAPI for their COVID, for their domestic terror, domestic violence, and for their anti-Asian racist plight, which, oh, by the way, we are currently enduring a 400 plus year and counting Holocaust as ADOCS in the country our ancestors built with their lives. And these Asians, median income nationally is $87,000 to our median income at $41,000. And that to me is a stretch. Okay. But the median home price is $340,000. But this is what your president, because I didn't elect him, I've already shared with you guys about the imperativeness that we weaponize our vote. We're out of time. Let me tell you, we may have one election cycle to get this right, so I need you guys to help me make this go viral. But I've been imploring upon you to do as Dr. Charles Morris of Abyssinian Church recommended when Theodore Roosevelt dishonorably discharged 167 Buffalo soldiers who were wrongfully accused of murdering a second white man after being quarantined to their barracks after being accused of murdering the first. Dr. Charles Morris said, "You shot us when our guns were empty, and we're going to return the same by delivering a blue top of the ticket and a red Congress to protect the Black South." Now, that is when we were Republicans, and we've been Democrats ever since FDR. So basically, we need to do that in reverse, family. We are not going to win if we continue to use the only commodity we've got, our vote, to deliver a trifecta of either party gets us George Floyd 9 minutes, 29 seconds to the neck. Know that that's what it's doing to us as a people, family. No one else. I'm not here to cry for the children at the border wall and all this kind of nonsense. This is not that show. This show is about ADOCS, American Descendants of Chattel Slavery. Foundational Black Americans are who we are. We were here long before the slave ships came. Okay, I'm going to have a guest on to talk about that. But some of us are here from the FBA, Foundational Black Americans, and others of us, our ancestors came on slave ships. We're a combination of the two. So this channel is about highlighting what is happening to us socially and economically. And my 6 p.m. segment is about anti-Black racism. Oh, yeah. I'll be back tonight at 6. So get your libations. It's 12 noon Pacific Standard Time and 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Thursday. Yeah, because I got to tell you what these current events are and how it factors into our money. I'm going to have another series soon called Pocket Watching, okay, where I'm going to be talking about all the money the government claims they don't have, but are spending up the wazoo on all the other groups and their wars and lining their own pockets. That show is coming called Pocket Watch. Just know that I'm working feverishly to bring you everything concerning ADOCS because I don't see Latinas crying for our slain and executed, for our social and economic injustices. I don't see Asians doing that. Okay, we got a few allies amongst all the groups, but I don't see them really in the new media spaces really talking about our issues and how they can help. So this is not the channel for that. I'm only talking about other groups as it relates to our being neutralized economically, and now they're coming for the vote. That's the only way you hear that. Otherwise, everything is over here is ADOCS Central. Just know that. So anywho, back to the text. So these are my notes I'm reading from that Biden 100-day address to the Congress. So ADOCS unemployment and underemployment rates, median national income, and I already told you what that is, the median national incomes and the median national home prices. So I want to talk with you a little bit more, okay, about our Black men. Yeah. This article needs a lot of attention. I hate to go back to it, but I didn't get to finish last segment, and I'm going to be on it till I finish it. Because if Black men don't have money, guess what they can't do? They can't marry. They can't afford to father their children. Okay? Which means we stop as a lineage. If black men cannot afford to get married and have babies, that's it. And this is a part of the ethnic cleansing agenda of this government and mainstream media. They're both complicit. Tonight, you're going to hear me address the segment of how they came after Uncle Tim Scott for saying this country isn't racist. But did you hear the author of the 94 crime bill, segregationist Jim Crow Sloppy Joe, say the same thing? Did you not hear Kamala the chameleon, you know, Cali's top cop, by her own admission, say there's no racism in this country? That's going to be at the 6 o'clock segment, and it's going to be fire. But that's what I mean by the mainstream media and the government being complicit in our ethnic cleansing. So this is another way they do that. They rob and deny the black man an education. They build preschool to prison pipelines, okay? This is what they're doing right now. Private prisons for the new slavery. They drop drugs in our communities and make that the hottest thing going. Yeah. And then they take us to jail for the new slavery because there are no jobs, or the jobs that are there are being given to the immigrants. Yeah. We're about 10%. We're 13% of the population and 10% of the unemployment rates in this country. Okay? And that's black men, but black women are not trailing far behind. As Biden gives $141 million to bring in 26,000 migrant children monthly into the country, as Biden gives Asians $80.5 million, and as Biden gives $30.2 billion to the Indians, who, oh, by the way, have been repaired since 1866, continuous repair. And we're going to talk about how the Japanese now want additional money. But when it comes to ADOCS, they want to sit up here and tell you that yours needs a study. You get a study. They didn't have to study none of these other groups to just give them the billfold. Just give them the wallet. Give them cash. But they want a study of cashless reparations for you. And I've already told you how education doesn't close this over $100 trillion egregious racial wealth gap. That's what it does not do. Okay? I talked to a very politically astute master's degree comrade of mine and best friend. And she said she literally had to go make burgers for one of them burger joints. Patties, you know, I guess on some type of manufacturing line where they make these things in advance. She had to go press patties for about a month. Then she literally had to leave her city to go find work in another city. She's ADOCS. Okay? I, too, when the pandemic hit, had to go and drive for Instacart with all my education, all my job experience. I'm a homeowner. But I'm ADOCS. And so our affirmative action gets to be fulfilled by the white women, the immigrants, and the LGBTQIA. Whatever crumbs are left, good luck with that, ADOCS. Whom it was intended for. Where was the fight, CBC and boomers, to make sure affirmative action exclusively served us? So this is why I fight. This is why the reparationist movement fights. This is why I'm coming on here twice a day, Monday through Thursday, and taking a 3-day weekend to set up the following week. Because I cannot afford, for the sake of my daughter, your daughter, our sons, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren, to take my foot off the gas. I can't afford to do that on my child. And you shouldn't either. So, like I said, a website is coming soon where I won't be buffering and doing all manner of these things for being shadow banned in this space. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on your notifications, because all of them are coming for me. All the new black media is under attack. Just know that we can't grow to critical mass without your assistance, without your support, financial and sharing. Because we deserve to be paid to do this at the rate I'm doing it. We deserve to be paid. I'm not apologizing for that. Okay, so back to the text. I was reading to you from Why Are Employment Rates So Low Among Black Men? I'm going to back up a little bit to talk about the last thing I left off at. So I was on table 2. Men without work in 2013-2014, ages 25 to 54 among whites and blacks. So this is a current article, okay? This is in March of this year. So they're looking at what was happening in 2013, 2014 in this table. I've already addressed a little of what was happening right now on the last segment. You'll have to look it up in the archives, okay? So let me back this up. Not working now. 17% of whites are not working now. This is during 2013-14. And blacks, 35%. So I want you to think about doubling these numbers because of the pandemic. This is 2013-2014. I want you to put your mind around what these numbers are like now for blacks. Because as I shared in the last segment, white folks ain't lost no traction. We're the ones that have lost a lot of traction. So take this number and I'm going to double it. So not working now, 17 to 20% white. As for blacks, 35 to 70%. Not working in the past year, 12% white, 27% blacks. I would double that. That's around, what is that? 56%, 54%. Institutionalized, 2%, 8% blacks, I would say 16%. Keep in mind that we are 13% of the population as I read these numbers. Out of the labor force, 11% whites, 17% blacks makes that 35% black. And this is why I oppose H.R. 40 as it stands, and Sheila Jackson Lee and all of her cohorts sitting up here running around talking about a cashless reparations. I'm seeking reparations in the hundreds of trillions over multi-generations. I'm about that 151 million per ADOCS. That's what the mayor's consortium said. That we are owed 6.2 quadrillion and counting. And don't come for me that the number is so high. It's your fault, white folks. It's your fault that the numbers are so high. Had you taken care of this when we got the 40 acres and a mule, you wouldn't be on the hook for 151 million per ADOCS. It is what it is. I make no apology for it. So this data indicates extremely high rates of prime age black men without work. These are the fathers. These are the ones who are making babies with our young daughters and can't afford to take care of them. These are the ones making babies with our young girls who are living at the abortion clinics because they're having sex unprotected, because underneath is their depression and us not giving them anything to live for. So just like everything else, marijuana, crack, alcohol, cigarettes, sex, food. These are all addictions. So these are the young men without jobs, without money, that are impregnating our young girls who have to go to the abortion clinics to add to those numbers, right? The abortion clinics that are regularly in our communities, now we got to abort our children because we can't afford to have these kids. Or if we have them, these are the very children that are being abused and caught up in a system that could care less about them. Hello, Makia Bryant. May you rest in peace. You and all your siblings who were living with a foster mother who felt it was okay to invite 2 ex-foster adult women to her home to beat up on the Kia about some damn dishes. And as she was defending herself, the race soldier comes up and shoots her 4 times. So this is what happens And it all starts with Black men not being able to get employment. Immigration being weaponized against them. Our own affirmative action being weaponized against them to deny them jobs. So they can't contribute in a healthy, fruitful way to the lineage to keep us going. We're stagnant in losing numbers. We were at around 40 million. Now we're around 37 million. Ethnic cleansing is what this is. While Biden, Skamala, Jim Crow, Joe, Skamala the chameleon, and Uncle Tim Scott from the Republican side tell you racism don't exist in this country. I'm not going to give no more because that's 6 o'clock segment. I'm going hard in the paint. So let me not do it now. I need something left for later. Also, Bayer and Charles show that adjusting annual earnings estimates to include white and Black men with zero earnings reduces the observed relative education and earnings of Black men and eliminates any observed progress in their earnings relative to white men since 1950. Indeed, these estimates show that the median annual earnings of Black men are only about half of those of white men at just over $20,000 and $40,000 respectively. I told you, our median national income around $41,000, but our Asians' median net worth is around $465,000, $450,000 to our $1,700. I'm talking about worth versus income, wealth versus income. You understand what I'm telling you? So we may have income, but we have no wealth. That was $1,700 prior to COVID. I don't know what it is now. I'll let you guys know. I'll look it up. Finally, Chetty et al. 2020 show that Black men experience less upward and more downward mobility over time, especially when you got a pandemic, relative to their parents than do any other race, gender group in the U.S., a finding that is driven by their weak employment and earnings outcomes relative to these other groups. You're damn straight. What explains low employment among Black men? For decades of research literature by social scientists has documented earnings and employment gaps between Black and white Americans and between Black men and other men more specifically, and analyzed their causes. In my view, this is the author speaking, the major causes of lower employment and earnings among Black men than other groups can be summarized as follows. Well, me speaking, once again, I reiterate that affirmative action that was meant to make us whole post-slavery, post-civil rights, that whole movement was supposed to make us whole, has been co-opted by white women as a minority, immigrants as a minority, and LGBTQIA. That's the number one cause. Because when corporate with 3 Ks, America with 3 Ks, can fill those positions with white women, immigrants, and LGBTQIA, they don't ever have to hire you. And you have no such social capital at those tables. You don't have Black folks that give a damn about Black folks at those tables. You got Black folks willing to get paid to do the white man's bidding, to keep you out. You got those type of Black folks. You got some Black white folks in a position to say no. Okay? And know this, that as California goes, so goes the nation. That we now down here have to know Spanish just to get the interview. And when you show up looking like me, speaking fluent Spanish, not that I speak fluent Spanish, I'm just saying when you show up, you don't have the complexion for protection. They're still not going to hire you. Not when Hispanics can be made white, like the Irish, the Italian, the Jews. When they can be made white, like the Asians, they're not hiring us. So the author says proximate causes lower education, skills, and work experience. Why is that? If you can't get an education because they set your kids up for preschool to prison pipeline, hence why you don't have education. If you can't get education because your median national income is $41,000 to Asians who just got another 80.5 million by Biden, the AAPI. If your median national income is $41,000, how do you afford an education, private or otherwise, for your kids? And even once you do get education, you can't get work because the other three buckets take up your affirmative action. So if you can't get work, that means you can't get experience, which means you can't sharpen your skills. Ultimate causes: discrimination and social spatial isolation. Mediating factors: lower marriage, child custody rates, and worse health. How are you supposed to have any of this without a job? How are you supposed to have a successful marriage with well-adjusted children and impeccable health if you don't have money? Just put it in the chat if you have a clue how that works. Reinforcing long-run factors: crime, incarceration, and child support. Yeah. The men get locked up when they don't pay the child support. But don't they need jobs to pay child support? The government CIA drops drugs in our community. Then you sit up and scratch your balls while you're asking, why is there so much murder and crime in our communities? As if that doesn't happen in every community when they're robbed of resources and there's a plan to ethnically cleanse them out of the country. Well, one could argue, and I would agree, that all these factors are the products of a long history and ongoing reality of systemic racism. Focusing on these specific factors is important if we want to generate a practical policy agenda to mitigate these problems. I definitely want policies with a gate for ADOCS around said policies, unakin to what happened with our affirmative action. But run me those dollars. Run me my $151 million that you owe. Directly deposit it into my account. Don't tell me how. You don't know how you get that done. You sure knew how to do it over the past 3 stimulus checks, directly deposited into our accounts. You find all kinds of wills and ways when it's time for you to spend the money to line your pockets and enrich you and make class-based policies which don't fix race. So don't tell me you can't get it done. But we just can't stop with policy. We need an infusion of cash over 100 years ago. This is how we got George Floyd 929, because dollars bring dignity and being poor makes you George Floyd, Ma'Khia Bryant, Dante Wright, Andrew Brown, Ahmaud Arbery. The list goes on and on. Rayshard Brooks, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown. You see where I'm going with this? And though I lump together the predictors of earnings gaps with those of employment gaps between Black men and other groups, some of these factors affect employment and earnings together, whereas others create barriers or disincentives to employment more specifically. It is widely known that education, skills, and work experience are major determinants of employment and earnings in the U.S. Indeed, gaps in human capital across race and class groups has increasingly driven the risen inequality in earnings that we observe over the past several decades. Me speaking, I've shared with you down here in Southern California, we've gone from 16% to 5%, less than that, since COVID, because we don't have work. We can't afford to be here. Okay? I'm amongst the blessed and highly favored. All the glory belongs to my inner Christ. I'm not even taking no credit. How I've been sustained with a fraction of my salary. Anywho, I'm going to tell you, we are less than 5% now Everybody's fleeing out of here because they can't afford to be here anymore. And we're 44% of the degree. Our median national income, our median income down here in SoCal is $53,500. Now, this is from a Color of Wealth LA report, 2004 to 2014. So this has changed. The median then was 53.5. Guess what? Hispanics, who outnumber us down here, I want to say they're about 52% of the population down here. 17% of the degree, and their median income at the time was $50,000. So you see, this is an ADOCS thing. How can you be 17% degree to our 44% degree and be within $3,500 of our median income down here? So when you're talking these conditions, you're talking specifically about American descendants of chattel slavery. You can have a people be migrants into this country, be within a stone's throw of doing as well as you. Why? After our ancestors built all the wealth all these groups eat from, are we in a race for the bottom? Back to the text. It is also well known that Black Americans lag behind white Americans and Asian Americans in educational attainment, and that men generally lag behind women. For instance, data on bachelor's degree attainment by race and gender in 2019 show that 0.24 and 0.28 have such degrees among Black males and females ages 25 and over. Comparable percentages among whites are 36% and 37%. If adjusted for undercounting and incarceration among Black men, the gaps between them and for the other groups would be higher. And this is why they're high to begin with. If you got a preschool to prison pipeline agenda for ADOCS, why are you sitting up here talking about the differences in degrees between Black women and Black men? We've got 1.5 to 2 million Black men on lockdown in the new slavery, many of whom are there for nonviolent offenses, for like peddling weed, while the state turns a profit, okay? And denies these brothers, when they come out, a right and entitlement to own the weed shops. Institutional systemic racism, family. Back to the text. The lower educational attainment of Black men relative to both white men and Black women no doubt reduces their earnings levels and employment relative to both groups. Indeed, Black men have relatively lower educational attainment than Black women, and white men and women at the other levels of education as well, such as high school completion and associate degree attainment. You get rid of 200,000 Black teachers nationwide, install white and immigrant teachers in our communities who set us up for, ADHD and want to put us on Ritalin and shit. And then you wonder why they don't have education or they don't have employment. You're setting them up by way of institutional systemic racism, removing everybody that cares about them from the educational system, right? It's no wonder why they can't complete high school, nor associate degrees, nor anything else. It is no wonder. There are systems designed to ethically cleanse ADOCS, and I'm sounding the alarm. Of course, there have been growing gaps in labor force activity between college and non-college men of all races. As the labor force activity of high school educated men has been declining for decades. Excuse me. White men who are in, ex-convicts, whatever you want to call them, ex-felons, they're out in the free society, get employment. Not our men. When they're released from prison, they end up back in prison because there's no jobs for them. They're able to use the fact that they serve time in jail against them. You got white high school dropouts more gainfully employed than educated ADOCS. Even so, employment, and then you've got immigration, an influx of immigrants. And this is why I tell y'all who want to get in your feelings and think it's better to replace a racist in office of 4 years with racists in office a combined 65 years with horrific records against ADOCS was a grand idea. At least Trump would have continued to build the wall and do his best to stave off this influx of immigration that Biden is on right now. Biden and Kamala. 60 million Hispanics. I want to say about 70 million immigrants by and large when you lump them all together. With designs to bring in 22 million more by the Biden administration. To neutralize our vote, the only commodity we've got left. After already neutralizing us economically, we can't afford to pay for our politics like these other groups can. Not on a 41,000 median national income and a median national home price of 340,000. With what? Even so, employment rates among Black men with high school or less education have been well below and declined more rapidly than those of similar white and Latino men. The disappearance of well-paying jobs in durable manufacturing and other industries and the decline of unions have hurt the earnings and employment of Black men more than white and Latino men, and the stagnation of the federal minimum wage has likely hurt us as well. Keep in mind, me speaking, 8 Democrats voted against the $15 per hour minimum wage with a median national home price of $340,000. $15 an hour when you really need $50 an hour. It's not great, and they voted that down. What does that mean for our people, family? Put 2 and 2 together. And while Biden does have plans, let me go to my notes. $1.3 million new jobs. How? If our affirmative action is used to benefit, that's what he has plans for. About 1.3 million new jobs. How many of those will go to ADOCS? If our affirmative action is used to benefit white women, immigrants, and LGBTQIA, how many of these new jobs, these green jobs, these infrastructure jobs will go to ADOCS specifically? Put it in the chat. I'm almost done with this article so I can jump over and see your comments. We'll continue with this segment tomorrow. It is what it is. We have to do the segment because I got to finish my notes on Biden and his address. And all this is relative, okay? So, just know that the Democrats and the Republicans are 2 wings of the same bird. I am suggesting and asking you and imploring upon you and begging you to weaponize your vote, the only commodity you've got left, by giving a red top of the ticket and a blue Congress to protect the over 53% of ADOCS who rely on government assistance by design of institutional systemic racism until we can replace the lanes with full-chested caste reparationists, and until the Democrats deliver the reparations in the trillions over multi-generations. Or we're done. Had we done that the last election cycle, we wouldn't have this threat of 100 million immigrants in this country as compared to our 37 million and lessening. When you add the immigrants, Black immigrants, that's about 42 million, I suppose. They're about 10%. We're 90%. Those of us whose ancestors built this country with their lives. Observed gaps between Black men, Black women, and white men and women can also be found on other important dimensions of skill. For instance, the achievement gap between white and Black people, and also between men and women, as measured by scores on standardized tests, has been well documented. Yeah, these tests designed to do what? Ethnically cleanse us about this country. These public schools are teaching to the test. They're not teaching our children to be critical thinkers the way they're born. Tests are designed to keep us out. You can't get into college without passing these tests. Down here in Southern California, at least they're well aware of that. I do believe that a couple of the UCs are not requiring the ACT or the SAT. But when you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready, because you don't know if you're going to be able to participate given Prop 209, which undermined us as a group, specifically when it came to quotas in these colleges. Thanks to ADOCS Ward Cunnerly, the Black white man that bought us Prop 209, and we still don't have a Prop 16 to overturn it. We need quotas down here for Blacks, because when affirmative action can be fulfilled by the other three, the whites, the immigrants, and the LGBTQIA, there's no more room to benefit who it was intended for. And this is by design of institutional systemic racism. Some evidence suggests the gap narrowed modestly in the 80s and 90s, but has remained fairly stable since then. Are you kidding? Not for us. Everything you do, think COVID. Test scores reflect cognitive, and COVID, me speaking again on education and why this is a crock. The pandemic is being used to set our children in particular up for the preschool to prison pipeline. Our babies have been left home while their parents go out here and gig 3 and 4 jobs just to make a living and a life, while the kids don't have the best access to Wi-Fi, and they don't have the up-to-date modernized computers. And they have to watch the children. They have to watch their younger brothers and sisters while mom, most of the time single mothers or single fathers, are off to go to work and drum up whatever they can to keep the roof over the kids' heads. Test scores reflect cognitive skills that help determine not only higher education attainment, but labor market rewards as well. Though they have been somewhat less documented and explored, a range of cognitive or socio-emotional skills, such as external and internal direction of aggression, motivation, and social skills, contribute importantly to both educational attainment and earnings as well. Here again, the evidence suggests that the Black population lags behind the white population along a number of dimensions. Finally, consistent and accumulating employment gaps between white and Black Americans, which emerge as soon as they enter the labor market, generate less work experience for Black workers. The extent to which lower work experience scars workers, reducing their wages and/or employment over time, has been the subject of some debate among economists, and recent evidence suggests that some scarring occurs. Of course it does. It's another way to keep you out. It's another way to keep you out. You don't have work experience. Oh, we can't hire you because, Brad and Julio and trying to think of an Asian name. Oh my God, Kong, I don't know, have more work experience than you because they're the ones that are being readily hired. It's a vicious cycle. Still, Neal and Johnson show that when statistically controlling for education, test scores, and work experience, observed earnings gaps between Black and white workers largely, though not completely, disappear. And while the exact interpretations of this evidence can be debated, the empirical fact has largely been accepted by economists and other social scientists. I just told you. There are earnings gaps, like they're huge. We make almost 40,000 less than Asians and 20,000 less than white folks on a national level. There's more of a gap when you drill down the South versus the East, the Midwest, and the West Coast. It's even more egregious. At the same time, the observed racial gaps in education, cognitive and non-cognitive skills, and work experience raise important questions about what drives these gaps in the first place. Number 2, ultimate causes are discrimination and social spatial isolation. There is abundant evidence that Black Americans, and especially Black men, face systematic discrimination in the labor market and in other walks of life, such as schooling. This discrimination limits their ability to accumulate skills and education credentials, as well as work experience. Once again, it's because institutional systemic racism has designed a preschool to prison pipeline for the not-so-new slavery under the private prison industrial complex. When the prisons can no longer profit, we can get back to educating our Black boys to become Black men. For instance, Holzer in '96 provides survey evidence that Black men receive fewer job offers than any other race gender group as job applicants, especially in the lower wage service sector. Absolutely true. Several audit studies which send out applicants of mixed race or gender with identical resumes to apply for jobs provide evidence that Black applicants receive fewer callbacks from employers than white applicants. Deval Pager, 2003, also shows that Black men without criminal records receive such callbacks at only approximately the same rate as white men with such records. And this is a shame. Did you hear what I just told you? White men with Black men without records get callbacks as often as white men with criminal records. And this is why we can't be fooled by these class-based policies. It doesn't fix us. We need specifics. And Charles and Gurion, 2008, showed that Black male earnings are relatively lower in states where whites express racial prejudice as measured in the General Social Survey, and that such prejudice can account for a fourth of the Black-white wage gap among men. Ain't that about a blip? While rigorous evidence of discrimination in the treatment of Black boys and girls in schools is much more limited, as audit studies within schools are quite difficult to implement, we find large disparities by race in disciplinary actions, such as suspensions from school and in grade retention. And some strongly suggest evidence appears to link such disparities to geographic areas where racial discrimination appears more prevalent. In addition, racial segregation and social isolation contribute to weak education and employment outcomes as well. Like I said, the country has fired or laid off 200,000 Black teachers nationwide. There's no wonder why there's such racism in the school system against our Black boys and girls in particular. They have no social capital. Metropolitan areas in the U.S. remain quite racially segregated. especially between Black and white households. A combination of housing market discrimination, exclusionary zoning in higher income white neighborhoods, and white flight when minorities enter these neighborhoods perpetuates the segregation over time. And since enrollments in public K through 12 schools depend primarily on where people live, segregated residential neighborhoods generate segregated schools that limit student achievement and employment outcomes over time. Isn't this what busing was all about? Because segregated means ethnic cleansing for ADOCS. When they are forced to teach us under integration, then we get some of that trickles down to us by association. Most public school dollars are taken out of the Black and brown schools where we're segregated and put into the white public schools where all the money is. Another white wealth transfer, because the very whites that can afford to privately educate their children send them to the best public schools, because those public schools are taking dollars from the Black and browns and giving them the crappy stuff and making sure the white public schools and the white neighborhoods that we've been redlined out of get the best of the best. The ones that can afford the private school education don't even have to, because they're getting the best out of public school dollars while we get the worst. My child is a benefactor of a white education, or at least a mixed and integrated education. But that's not what they wanted for her. They want to kick her back to the neighborhood. Now it's been gentrified, but the neighborhood, the school hasn't been gentrified. The neighborhood where I can afford to purchase property has been gentrified. But when I first moved here in 2007, I had to fight to clean up the block. That was done on, like, you know how the country was built by our ancestors' lives? I had to do this neighborhood that way. I had to clean up the block. Incessant calls to the police to make it nice for white folks to move in because they can afford the more lavish homes on the block. The whites and the Asians and the Hispanics. When my house was on the market, that's all they could afford to come and see my space. 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, 20-minute walk to the beach, $525,000. Social networks, we have none. Among Black Americans, and especially those residing in segregated neighborhoods, tend to be weak as well, to none. We have long known that such networks play important roles in helping workers find jobs. But new evidence is now appearing that such networks impede the ability of Black Americans, and especially Black men, to have access to well-paying jobs in many regions of the U.S. And given the absence of Black men from the labor market in many such neighborhoods, as we noted earlier, the networks available to younger Black men now entering the labor market are especially too weak to help those without college degrees find and keep well-paying jobs. Our men can't even get employment as young adults in retail. Mediating factors, marriage and health, declining employment among less educated men in the U.S., and especially Black men, has been correlated with a decline in marriage rates. It is hard to determine exactly to what extent this relationship is causal, and if it is, in which direction the causation works. What seems most likely is that causal effects, work both ways. On the one hand, A lack of effective employment opportunities renders many Black men as less marriageable. On the other hand, lower marriage rates reduce the incentive of men to work to support their families. That is a lie. I call foul. I call foul. Black men absolutely want to marry Black women. They can't afford to because of the first part. A lack of effective employment opportunities renders many Black men as less marriageable. You castrate the Black man when he can't get gainful employment. Now, if he don't have any incentive to work, it's because he's exhausted from trying to find work and being discriminated against. Weak health also impedes labor force activity, especially among less educated men. The health of less educated white men has deteriorated the most in recent years due to substance abuse and obesity, and racial gaps in such well-being have narrowed. But most evidence suggests that morbidity and mortality among Black men continues to be higher than among comparably educated white men. Self-reported disability also appears to be very high among Black men and women out of the labor force in Detroit and other major cities. If you can't get work, how can you afford health insurance? A white man that's deteriorating is his choice. I have no tears for white men not being able to get over in a country designed to make you get over. You simply don't have the will. But substance abuse, obesity is our plight. Because all you want to do is numb yourself to the fact that you don't have the resources to be a man. You don't have the resources to even date an educated Black woman, which is why a lot of these national commercials in the mainstream media are purporting Black women with white men. I've been hearing about it. I don't watch it. But this is another form of ethnically cleansing us. To put whiteness in there and to continue to whiten up our culture until you can't see Black anymore. Number 4, reinforcing long-run factors, crime, incarceration, and child support. And I'm going, after this, actually, I'm going to come over and see your comments. I'm going to do number 4 tomorrow because I've got to jump and take my daughter to track, and I've got to get back into the courts this afternoon. So let me see what my illustrious audience has to say about it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Monday, Brian. Hi, Trey. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. Brian says, I missed it. I'm glad you could be full-throated on Fox Soul. Perhaps you were able to simply express what they couldn't. No, they couldn't. So you were right about that. That's one thing I felt satisfied in. They certainly can't say the things I said. I all but called Tim Scott, Uncle Tim, a coon. It almost slipped out. I had to catch myself a couple times. But Brian says, yep, Black folks get stagnant congressional bills, the possibility of a study commission, and maybe Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Yay. You're right for the cynicism, Brian. But we're going to keep it live and in living color in front of everyone to see what's happening to us as a lineage. So they're not going to be able to do so peaceably. I'm going to light their asses up every opportunity I get on this channel. Brian says, or we're black men, the ones who choose to not be bothered being fruitful and multiplying so as to prevent breeding in the next statistic generation. Money matters. Just ask the church. Or when businesses look to hire you, it's for a position that's typically at the bottom and stuck there. Absolutely. Another discriminatory tactic against us is not being a perceived cultural fit among the other staff, regardless of skills and experience. You have said a mouthful as per usual, Brian. Well, with that said, family, we're at 106. I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to go back and try to finish this segment out because I want to keep the segment moving and get to my other talking points that are very critical to go over in your midday wake-up call. So let me finish that article out with the time I have remaining, and then I will bid us adieu until 6 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time for your anti-Black racism report, where I'm going to be discussing Skamala, Jim Crow, and Uncle Tim's benign neglect of ADOCS by claiming we don't have a racist country. America's not racist. I would venture to say this is the most racist country on the planet. And I'm going to make the case for it on the 6 o'clock rendition of Anti-Black Racism, my Ida B. Wells 2.0 series. I hope to see you there. But let me finish the article out. Reinforcing long-run factors, crime, incarceration, and child support. The enormous racial disparity in incarceration rates in the U.S. is widely known. At its peak, it was estimated that about 1/3 of all Black men appeared likely to spend some time in their lives being incarcerated, while among high school dropouts, the rate was an appalling 2/3. We're 13% of the population. The higher incarceration rate among Black men in turn, Black American men in turn, is likely driven by 3 factors. Higher participation in crime, including violent crimes. Once again, why is that, family? Because we have the highest rates of unemployment, underemployment, and a preschool to prison pipeline. That is what breeds more crime and violent crimes in our communities. You tend to steal from and kill the people you live amongst. This is nothing different than before the Irish were made white, before the Italians were made white. Understand that this is what goes on in communities where you are being robbed of resources. Harsher criminal sentences imposed on the crimes that Black men are relatively more likely to commit, such as possession and sales of crack cocaine relative to powder, and discriminatory policing and more frequent conviction in the criminal justice system. The fact that Black men have participated more frequently in crime, especially during the 70s and 80s, was at least partly driven by their perception that the relative rewards to legal work were declining among the less educated, while the rewards to crime, especially drug sales, were growing. It's not a perception, it is what's actually happening. It is what's literally happening. What do you mean perception? It's the truth. And the government is complicit in it. We don't have the resources to fly drugs into our communities, to fly guns into our communities. But drug sales also led to the crack wars of the 80s and beyond, which imposed enormous costs on Black men in terms of employment loss, incarceration, and death. I would venture to say it's because of a lack of employment that they found no other options. It's the lack of employment and underemployment. You dangle the American dream in front of them and not pay them a living wage to have it. Not even a living wage. You don't pay them an American wage for the American fruit you dangle in front of their eyes. You don't employ them and you pay them significantly less when you do. And then you wonder, you scratch your balls why they decide to go sell crack. It's in the music. You guys on both sides of the aisle create the problem and then want our vote to be the solution while continuing to tether us to the bottom as the anchor of your capitalism that everyone else eats from, but the very ADOCS whose ancestors built it with their lives. Like we don't see you. While such violent crime has declined greatly since the mid-90s, leading to great improvements in the quality of life in residents of low-income Black neighborhoods, me speaking, no, it hasn't. Because the police department is hiring the KKK, the skinheads, and the neo-Nazis to come into our communities to execute us with qualified immunity. Such activity remains considerably higher among Black than white men, according to several sources of data. And young Black men in such neighborhoods remain more targeted by police and more subject to the use of force as well as incarceration. Indeed, incarceration has risen over much of the past 2 to 3 decades, while crime has declined, with the former perhaps contributing to the latter. Though the incarceration rate has also been declining over the past several years. No, it hasn't. Not for us. Not for us. But now there seems little doubt that incarceration reduces subsequent employment among ex-offenders, especially Black men. At a minimum, such men fail to accumulate meaningful work experience while they are incarcerated. But in addition, their experiences lead employers to avoid hiring them, and for the men themselves to become permanently disconnected from employment networks. Not white men, though. White men get out of jail and get to work because their own is hiring them, because their own can afford to hire them. In addition, declining marriage rates between Black men and women, along with rising percentages of children being born to unwed parents, have resulted in the fact that over 60% of all Black children are born to single parents. Over 60%. This is what happens when the Black man can't get employment. He can't be a great husband. He can't be a great father without the means to do so. In response, enforcement of child support orders on non-custodial Black men by the U.S. child support system has grown more rigorous. While such enforcement has generated some positive outcomes for Black single mothers and their children, when fathers cannot or do not pay, they go into arrears or in debt on their payments. And since the deduction of child support payments from their formal earnings grow very large when this happens, it apparently drives some of these non-custodial fathers out of the formal labor market in much the same way that high tax rates might do so. This is the same thing that drove the Black man from the home during the era of welfare. It's all by design, and it's all political. And despite some reforms in the child support systems during the Obama years that were designed to ease this pressure on poor men, their incentives to work when in arrears remain limited. Conclusion, what should we do to raise employment among Black men? I told you. Stop relying on corporate with 3 Ks to hire us. Run us those checks in the trillions over multi-generations. Then Black men can be in business for themselves. Let's see what the author says in conclusion. Low employment rates among Black men have no single cause, but instead reflect a range of interacting and reinforcing demographic, social, and economic factors, plus adverse policy choices over time. These include low levels of educational attainment, skills, and work experience, discrimination in employment and likely in education, as well as geographic and social isolation, low marriage and health levels, and participation in the criminal justice and child support systems. Accordingly, raising the employment rates of Black men will require sustained policy efforts along a number of these dimensions to improve outcomes. Among the efforts that would most likely improve their employment rates would be the following: desegregating schools and neighborhoods as much as possible, investing in pre-K and K through 12 policies to raise cognitive and socio-emotional skills among children, especially those in predominantly Black neighborhoods, providing early work experience for youth, including summer youth employment, raising the federal minimum wage, reducing incarceration rates while expanding cost-effective reentry programs, expanding services to raise employment and child support payments of non-custodial fathers while reducing the disincentives to work created by arrears, and subsidizing jobs for the many long-term unemployed and out of the labor force for whom it would be very challenging to find and keep private sector jobs on their own. Though we do not have abundant evidence of cost-effective policies in each area, we should implement and fund them where we do have such evidence and experiment and evaluate where we don't. But the existence of large racial disparities between Black men and other groups should not be tolerated or accepted as inevitable. Policy choices are available that can enable us to make progress on this issue, and it is imperative that we explore and implement them. I want to thank you so much, family, for tuning in to this rendition of As the World of ADOCS Turns, your midday wake-up call. Hi, Amos. Thank you for joining the live. And for those of you who have yet to chat, I thank you so much for joining the live. And I hope to see many of you back this evening, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, for your anti-Black racism report. Until then, family, I love you Black. I love you strong. Peace. Ciao for now.